Well, good morning, everybody. Here on this Wednesday morning, I thought we'd start off by looking at some lightning data. You know the story we're following this week. We've got these cutoff lows that come through California, of which there's still another one yet to come. They kind of move over the southern Rockies, they get into the Mid-South and exit through parts of the Mid-Atlantic. But yesterday, as some of these storms came through, they produced some actually severe weather into parts of Illinois, just as an example, but quite a bit of lightning. Now, the storm system we were talking about, here it is. This is just from last night in through this morning. It's exiting off to the east, and it's moving pretty quickly, taking its moisture with it. But on the backside, our next cutoff low is already moving out of California into Arizona. And this one's going to emerge later this week into the southern plains, which is going to be our next big precipitation maker. And we need it. We need to get the moisture into this area. Now, with this system that just came through and the ones that have gone through California, we've added some snow. And Matt did a good job yesterday of kind of highlighting where we've seen some early season snow. But there was some lake effect still behind the cold air that came through the northeast. We saw this little skiff of snow that came through parts of, getting into Minnesota, Wisconsin, and over into Michigan. And then we did add some snow into parts of the central Rockies and also down here in the Sierra Nevada. As we get further into December, those snow maps become much more meaningful, so we're going to dig deeper into that as we go forward. But I wanted to point out just how much additional moisture compared to averages in California right now. And it's all due to these cutoff lows, right? So this is not like your true big El Nino, atmospheric river coming in like this. These are these weak little cutoff lows that just linger and spend time, and they sit and spin, which means we often think if we're in California, we're like, if it's a La Nina year, we're worried about moisture. And here we are having a La Nina year, and we've had plenty of it coming through in the last couple of weeks. Notice, though, as you get farther to the east, how dry things have been here, but that's about to change in a big way. The soil moisture values there are extremely low in the southern plains, the central plains, much of the Great Lakes Basin, Midwest, the southeast. There's a huge area in the country that is missing moisture, and that is not to ignore some of these pockets in the western and high plains. I'm thinking about the Golden Triangle, for example, here up in Montana, which has been so exceptionally dry. And I'm closer to this dryness here. I'm up in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho today, talking to Washington wheat growers. I can't wait to get out in front of them later on this afternoon. But this is something we're going to just try to watch the evolution of to see how much this map changes before we truly lock in some cold air. And as you know, there's quite a bit of cold air coming through. So over the last 72 hours, just getting a quick look at total precipitation across the country here, and just understand we are expecting some big changes to this. If you're south, not if you're north. And if we just go out there and look at why this is important, over the last 30 days across these regions we're expecting heavier rains. We've had deficits from 1 to 5 inches in total. And now it's not to ignore places around this, but this is the area that we're expecting to see the wettest conditions as we go forward in this current pattern, which until the cold air comes in, we're watching a lot of systems follow that track. All right. So given all of that, let's go and have a look at what we're dealing with here. Storm Prediction Center over the next 3 days is just going to keep an eye on the southern tier of the United States for the risk of more storms. They just have marginal risks out, as you can see for today. Tomorrow, just a general risk of thunderstorms. Same thing for the day on Friday here. But if we look, take note of their regions of excessive rainfall. And why this is so important is these two areas, as I just highlighted, have been so dry over the last 30, even 60 days in some places. So they've got flood watches out right now, kind of for the hill country of southern Texas. This, again, was the site of the horrific flooding back in July 3rd and 4th. And I do expect these flood watches to expand quite a bit as we go forward in time. There's some dense fog areas around the country. Still have the flood watches that are out for parts of California. This is really down in the desert here, but the flood watches that are in place early this morning. And we're going to watch this whole pattern just evolve into a much, much wetter regime across the south. So let's get and have a look at it. This is the high-res NAM. Let's just get a kind of sense of where this is going here. Today, here we are in the middle of the day on Wednesday, working our way into Thursday morning, and that's when we're expecting to see the rainfall move into this area. Now, the trajectory is this. You have the flow from the Gulf, you have the flow from the cutoff, so it's kind of just training over the same areas here in Texas, and that's why we're expecting to see, if you just go back to it, this is really early Thursday morning through middle of the day of Thursday. That's going to be several hours of getting moisture into that area. Moves into parts of Oklahoma, Kansas, and then it finds this line right about the northern border of Kansas or Missouri, or right across central Illinois and Indiana, where the moisture seems to not be able to extend much farther to the north. Now, that's due to several reasons. There's a lot of drier air in place here, But on top of that, this system and where its main trough is it's not ejecting and lifting. It's just pushing itself off to the east. So through the next 60 hours or so, that's the trajectory of this first system. Now, as I mentioned, there's another cutoff low, and there it is coming into California. In fact, it's got a little wave out ahead of it here, and those both are working their way back into Southern California as well. But if we just get out there and say, all right, what's this all mean? Well, for the next 7 days, should have the 12Z, there it is. Newest model run just came in. We've got some wetter, very wet conditions down here. We've got that hard line where to the north of it, we're not expecting much. But the chances for 3 to 5 inches of rain in this corridor are pretty high. We've got two systems. They both have the same or similar trajectories, and as a result, they're going to be able to put moisture over the same areas, tracking in the same locations. Now, to the north of it, we're drier. Pretty clear here. To the south and east of it, this is an area we've seen the models struggle to kind of put precipitation in place. And after this weekend, which was just, absolutely obliterating parts of the northwest with storm systems, we now see things backing off a little bit, and we have most of our biggest snows coming into the Rockies and the coastal ranges in British Columbia than anywhere else. So with that kind of as a setup, I got to get here. Now, you know that we've had some concerns as we get into December of some really easy access to Arctic air, and this is the beginning of it. That ridge that you see there over the next 15 days builds, and it's going to start to just occupy more of Alaska. Now, if you were to also see these same deep red colors here, we'd be talking about some of the coldest air that we've ever observed coming straight out of the Canadian archipelago from the Arctic straight into the south central U.S. and then plowing east. All right, but we're not fully there yet. If we see any sort of a blocking signal, downstream, it's not in the North Atlantic. You can actually get a good idea that we're moving the flow here pretty easily. It's maybe way over here in parts of Russia or Eastern Europe. But that ridge is going to be what's most critical. Now, to zoom in and show you kind of the North American view, we come back to our cutoff story in the near term. So there goes the first one on Thursday. That's the one that opens up the moisture here. Here comes the second one, Thursday afternoon and evening, that dives into California. There it goes. So our cutoff story is still in place, and that one moves out. We get a little clipper wave that comes into the north. These two may phase together, which could be interesting for next Tuesday, Wednesday. This would be this pre-Thanksgiving storm system that rolls through the country. Matt kind of highlighted that there was a lot of variability in the models, but we are expecting a deeper low to come through this area with some pretty heavy snows on the back side of it. But that thing probably gets pretty far to the east by the time we get to the Thanksgiving holiday. And Friday, I think it's just going to be a story of how much cold air came in behind this. And then that is the beginning of this Arctic setup that the end of November and the beginning of December is going to give us. And what's making it all possible is this. Look at that ridge out there by December 2nd. You shove warm air here, it will have to come out over there this time of year. The cold air will have to come out here. So to see all this, let's talk precip first. We're going to compare the GFS to the Euro here. Everything's back up. The Cloudflare outage resolved itself, I think, about 10 minutes after Matt recorded yesterday. So our website is back up and live and has been for about 24 hours now. If you just have a look, here is the system on Thursday. Look at that. And then that hard northern line to it. It moves through and exits the mid-Atlantic. Next cutoff low is already in place in California. So we can just kind of watch that one come through. More snow for the southern Sierra. That one then comes out. But this one's got the link to it. This is next Monday, where this system and the system coming through here are going to be able to pair up. See that? Watch the system coming out of southern British Columbia, the system coming out of Texas and Oklahoma, and the two of them right now in the models are expected to kind of work together. Now, as you can see, the GFS doesn't have, kind of the full linkage in place, but the European is. And that'll affect a lot of things when we look at our snowfall maps and our precipitation, but I do see this. In both cases, high pressure builds in here, which means we're going to have winds coming out of this direction, which means Thanksgiving likely going to have a pretty wild swing in temperatures on the backside of this low. And as we get into Friday, there's really good chances of some strong lake effect bands here we should be preparing for. All right. Now, given all of that, I want to look for the likelihood of this low being in place. So I went out to the European ensemble and we created a map that looks at all of where the models are putting down the low pressure centers. And by next Wednesday afternoon, seems to be pretty clear that high pressure is following some broader area of low pressure, which means this is a more robust solution in the models. And with that high pressure that comes in behind this, that is what's going to serve you up the really Arctic air as we finish this month of month of November and start the month of December. So what's it look like in terms of total precip? Let's just add it up from the European model first. That's through Saturday. As we play this out, capturing that system early week next week, watch this northern edge start to go away. Here we are. This is Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. See that coming through the Midwest there? So we're pushing a system through that region, but the vast majority of the heaviest rains are going to come from the cutoffs here, and then how they move through the southern plains, Mid-South, Delta, Ozarks, this whole region south of that line. Now you take note, there's a large area here that is missing out on a lot of this precipitation, including the interior parts of the Pacific Northwest. The jet stream flow here again is just hitting the mountains more perpendicularly. That's what's sending a little clipper over the top, and all of this is going to be snow up here, we think, according to the European guidance. But I wanted to point out, if that was the 10-day forecast from the Euro, this is the 10-day forecast from the GFS. And again, that's a broad area. Take note, the GFS does not take the system, the pre-Thanksgiving system, into the upper Midwest. The Southeast stays drier, but a huge chunk of this part of the country stays drier as well. Now, if we look at the snowfall, let's just add up the European model. So again, we're adding more to the southern Sierra Nevada, some to the southern Rockies here, central Rockies. But the best flow is really coming into Canada. So let's see this, British Columbia, and then watch right in through here. We've got these chances of bringing in some snow. So you look at a 10-day forecast map from the ECMWF, and there's your best chances if you're not in the mountains, right in through here. And again, this is that pre-Thanksgiving storm system, and we're going to follow it up with some lake effect behind this. The GFS, again, less aggressive, doesn't have the waves timed or linked, and as a result, we have a much smaller snow swath, but still pretty good evidence of some lake effect behind this. Very similar picture for the southern Rockies and the Sierra Nevada on total snow. I did want to show you, though, the chances of these drier places, how robust of a chance is it that they stay dry. And if you get into the Great Basin or the Columbia River Basin, you come up here to parts of Montana, Wyoming, the northern plains, this region is very dry over the next 10 days, as is the southeast. And this is just going to be an ongoing story as we go farther into the winter, because most of the winter forecasts do not have this continuing. They have actually bigger snows, wetter conditions for here, and also much of the Northwest. The winter forecasts are drier here and here, where it's not dry right now, where we have the cutoff lows going through. But it's just something to watch. Now, snowfall forecast, these are the chances of getting 3 inches in the next 10 days, according to the latest European model. So you can see the ensemble's pretty, on board with that region getting the best chances of snow. What I want to know is, following this, when all the cold air comes in, do we really begin to see what the models are suggesting? Such at the beginning of December, we've got better chances in this corridor of adding out some snow, bigger snows for the Rockies. I mean, you can still see the the Cascades and the Sierra Nevada adding, and a lot of snow throughout much of the Canadian prairie. Seems to be a signal here with this cold air, we're going to be packing in some snow. The details just aren't understood yet, but I do want to show you that the newest update from NOAA and the Climate Prediction Center, they're out there thinking that time frame after Thanksgiving, very beginning of December, we are going to have snows coming into our major mountain systems out west, and then some into the plains and northern, possibly getting into the upper Midwest, northern tier of the United States. All right. Bigger picture, though, if you look, the models are not in agreement about what's going to be happening into week 2. Can you kind of see the spread in in the models? And then you compare it to the Climate Prediction Center. I do take note of one thing. With that ridge building off the west coast, we start to see a major backing off of the moisture that's going to be hitting the western United States. There's a ridge. You can't go through it. You got to go around it. So that's where we think it's going to go around, unleash cold air, or to the south maybe, but it's not likely going to get into this area, so we are expecting it to go a bit drier in that area. But I don't know if it lasts for very long. Some of our longer range outlooks going from November 25th to December 25th, they actually come back around to delivering more Cascade snow. They get quite wet in parts of the Northwest Canadian prairie. They still have quite a bit of action, going on, into this area as well. But what I'm curious about is this. You see, when we go past Christmas into the end of December and look at December on the whole, this starts to show up again. And that's a concern because we know historically that with La Niñas, I mean, you can see the map, that this region just tends to be drier in December, okay? Now, I know it's a positive correlation, but it's a correlation with a multivariate INSO index, meaning that if it was El Nino, this would be wet and this would be dry. But we are seeing La Nina conditions, and that might be one of the bigger reasons why this is starting to show up drier and this is so wet. Now, when you look at this, just remember, we are going to have an early peak of La Nina. And I think the Indian Ocean dipole letting go, the MJO big swings they're about to take, I think we're gonna get a pattern that could look something like this, meaning that the rainfall coming into this region right now is mission critical to preventing some more early winter drought. So we need it. We need every drop of what's coming into this area. Okay. Temperature-wise, frost risk map, again, you can see how ahead of this Arctic outbreak, how far to the north we're taking our frost line once again over the next 7 days. But don't get too used to it. Now, let me rephrase that. You can get used to it for the next 7 days. Watch this. Here's today's highs and tomorrow. Look how warm this sector is versus where the cutoffs are keeping things so cool down here with cloud cover and rain in the southwest. But as we go from Thursday to Friday, getting into this weekend, that's Saturday and Sunday, very, very mild conditions moving in across the northern tier of the United States. And then you see this just bleeding over here to Monday and Tuesday. So your pre-Thanksgiving setup is quite mild if you're kind of in the eastern half of the country, save maybe the northeast, But that is the beginning of it, right there, the beginning of the really cold air coming through. And our temperature matrix shows it. Day 5 through 10 in all of the models. See it building here? This is when the large ridge sets up off the west coast and tries to go toward Alaska. And then in every model, the European ensemble, the GFS ensemble, the artificial intelligence, look at the AI models forecast of the temperatures from November 29th to December the 4th. I stopped the color bar at 20 degrees colder than normal. So that's why this is all just painted this. So that ridge builds, heat goes into Alaska, and it just gets unloaded here. And that's going to be an interesting setup, to say the least. Now, the AI model might be overdoing this. I don't know. We sometimes tend to trust the ensembles out there a bit better, but the GFS has got it. Look at that cold come through. My question is, how long does that last? Because we've seen the risk of hazardous temperatures just before Thanksgiving to the 2nd begin to set up here first. We know it's going to bleed east after that. It's also going to hit parts of the northwest. But we're curious as to how far. I was kind of playing around. Matt and Andrew and I are about to release a new version of Ag Weather where we're incorporating more model forecasts and more custom products. And in this new temperature forecast, I pulled this up for Glasgow. You can now get 4 models real quick. European model, GFS, the artificial intelligence model by the Europeans, and Google's GraphCast. And, look, Glasgow, just normal. And then here, that's Tuesday. The Arctic air comes in. Every model's down here cold. But look at the AIFS. It's looking at temperatures on Monday after Thanksgiving, between -10 and 0. Now, some models are like, let's recover a little bit. But there's quite a bit of spread out here. Now, I was just curious because I was just in Glasgow 2 weeks ago. And I was like, well, what are they going to have in terms of snow and precip? Well, let me show you what you're about to get out of our new version of this coming out soon. We're actually going to give you 8 different model precipitation forecasts. You can compare them all like that. Just stack them up and look at all of them. I love this, okay? But that AI model seems to be putting something in there, not this Friday, Saturday, Sunday, but next Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And if it's going to be cold, it's probably going to come down as snow. Now, if you look, the European, the GFS, nothing. The GraphCast, a little bit. But the AI model, Glasgow, if you're listening, 6 inches of snow out of this. Whatever. It's just one model. I just wanted to show you some of the cool stuff you're going to be getting. Plus, if you get the account, we're going to give you the full precipitation grid of every ensemble member. Oh, it's going to be fun. Okay, enough of that. Let's get to talking about what the other hazards could be. The bad part about this cold air is as that high pressure sinks in, we're likely going to get very, very windy on the backside of this. So there is this risk just before Thanksgiving and then after of getting some very strong winds in this area. All right. Okay. Bigger picture, I keep talking about this Alaskan ridge. There's lots of ways by which we can watch it. And one of the ways is by looking at what's called the West Pacific Oscillation. Now, what you're paying attention to here is it's very positive now, and it's expected to, at the end of November and starting December, to go very negative. Now, we know a few things about that. This is what this typically does. You tend to have big ridging that starts off the west coast and runs all the way up here through the Chukchi Sea, or through the Bering Sea, partially into the Chukchi Sea, but over into this part of Siberia. And what this tends to do is this tends to just open up channels to drop colder air into this region. So to see that negative phase of the West Pacific Oscillation lasting through the first half of December is what's so critical here. What I'm also paying attention to, and I hit this on Monday, Matt covered it again yesterday, this feature right in through here in this Hofmüller diagram, okay, which shows trough and ridge positions over time, suggests that right around Thanksgiving and lasting till about the 9th or 10th, there will likely be, so just line it up vertically here, there will likely be deep troughs of low pressure sitting here, maybe linking up at the Hudson Bay. In addition to that, I'm just offering support. We do expect the Atlantic, that's the red bars here, to be a dominant blocking feature going forward. This is like the North Atlantic block that can really settle in and cause some issues here. So that's going to be critical to watch as well. And then don't forget, we are still in the midst of a very, very weak polar vortex, which means we're going to link up with the polar vortex disruption and help just to anchor cold air over the central part of North America. Now, if you're curious what that graph means, the polar vortex is normally sitting and spinning as I'm kind of drawing here. That's what it's doing. We're almost getting a complete reversal of these winds in places compared to average. And this is the sudden stratospheric warming event that's been discussed so much, displacing the polar vortex, which is now elongated and weaker and sits something like that. There's risk that we could keep this around something like this for a while this winter, a very weakened and disturbed polar vortex. So long story short, we have this post-Thanksgiving Arctic push that comes through. How far to the south it goes will likely be limited. We get through mid-December, possibly mild. Let me rephrase that. Possibly releasing the hold on the cold air. But then I want to show you, as we approach Christmas, the models are once again going back over quite cold. So December could be one that is going to be pretty cold, and we think quite a bit of snow. And we also think that it's maybe a precursor to what we could call the front half of winter. So expect maybe more of this into January before La Nina completely lets go. Now, I'm going to finish this up with just a quick discussion on MJO and then South America. What have we been doing? We've been questioning if the MJO is really going to move over to phase 8. Because if it got stuck in phase 8 or 1, we would be locked into brutal cold. But it does this real quick. See that? Real fast. That's that Kelvin wave Matt was talking about. Now listen, if I were to show you these green colors and I were highlighting that they were just getting stuck like this, okay, and it was just solid, we would be talking about, a repeat of some of those classic December winters, like the brutal ones. But we're not. What we are seeing, though, is subsidence here. And where is that? That's phase 2. Now, what am I doing? Whenever you push down on the atmosphere here, it's going to rise somewhere over here, just not give you that really full, strong signal. So is the MJO going to come out and sneak over here and maybe get to this point? I think it is. But do you understand something? If the reason why it's going to look like it's doing this, okay, is that, or forgive me, I'm so sorry. I said this backwards. What I meant was the MJO is going to do this rapid transition, okay? Let me show you that now. See it? This goes 6, 7, 8, like that, okay? But what I think it's going to do is it's going to pop back out over here into phase 6. Now let me just rephrase this so I can get my brain straight here. I think it's going to happen because of subsidence there. So whenever you look at this MJO diagram, remember, wherever you have the rising motion on one side of it, the other side of you tend to have sinking. I think the sinking motion out of the Indian Ocean, as it just gives up on the Indian Ocean dipole, makes the MJO come back over here to phase 6. That's what my guess is. And that's why, if you look at phase 6 throughout December, what does it favor? Ridging off the west coast toward Alaska, troughing here. I mean, Matt brought this up yesterday, but that's what we think is going to happen. Now, that's your North American pattern, okay? What about South America? We have a lot of questions about South America in this because if you look historically, phase 6 is neither a wetter nor a drier setup. Now, if it was phase 4 or phase 5, we'd be talking about early season dryness in parts of, major parts of Brazil's growing area, while southern Brazil and Argentina are wet. If it was in phase 8, phase 1, we'd be talking about super wet conditions here, which we do know. Okay, just take a look at this again. We are going into this. We're going to get some of this for a moment. And I wonder if that's heavily influencing these models, because the look out there to almost the third week of December, this is just a couple days before Christmas, is very wet here in the GFS, very dry there. It's dry in the Amazon. Now, the European model doesn't share the same view. The European model is much wetter in through this area and dry here. The only place they agree on it being drier is parts of Paraguay, Rio Grande do Sul, Uruguay, most of northern Argentina. So that is the only spot where the models agree. They do not agree on this, and the models have major differences in how much additional rainfall is going to be coming through here. But I think that it's the transition of the MJO that's driving this right now. I think that's what my thought on this is. So the question is, where have they been? And the new iPad site's back up after the shutdown of the government. And for the last 2 months, we've been pretty dry in Goiás, Tocantins, parts of southern Mato Grosso, and then Mato Grosso do Sul, as you can see. And if the model's right, we're going to hit this area with a lot of rain, and we're going to start to see the dryness creeping in here and into Argentina as well. And I think that's going to be a story that we're going to have to watch to see if it impacts the production in southern Brazil and Argentina going forward, or if it possibly gets too wet at times in Brazil's center-west all the way over to the east. All worth talking about in the coming days and weeks. So that's all I got for you today. Matt will talk with you again tomorrow. I'll pick it up on Friday. We'll just watch the story evolve. Appreciate your attention. Thanks.